The Holy Gospel according to St. John, the second chapter. On the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. The Gospel of the Lord. Some of you may have uttered some of these cries in times of crisis and despair. We're out of milk. We're out of flour. We're out of sugar. Or remember when COVID began, we're out of toilet paper. Or to be more serious about this, you may have encountered times when you've said, we're out of gas. We're out of food. We're out of work. We're out of money. Or all of us existentially have had those times when we're out of suggestions, we're out of patience, we're out of luck, we're out of hope, we're out of answers, we're out of time, we're out of possibilities. And as this pandemic keeps carrying on, all of us are saying, we're running out of steam. Now, in this situation of the wedding at Cana in Galilee, to say we're running out of wine is not merely an inconvenience or a social faux pas that will elicit temporary embarrassment and copious apologizing to guests. In that time and context where there was nothing more important than something like a wedding celebration, to be out of wine would be a personal and social disaster. It shows lack of preparation and care for what you do. It's as if they don't know what they're doing. There was no planning for contingencies. And this is a reputation-ruining event that will bring shame upon this newlywed couple for the rest of their married lives. You can just hear the women at the well as they're gathering water for the day saying, "Oh, the Goldsteins. You mean that couple that ran out of wine at the wedding reception? What a disgrace. It was shameful, I tell you, just shameful." Wine, the symbol of God's blessing at celebrations, so that to run out of wine meant that their lives are cursed. And no amount of water in those 6 large purification jars will ever cleanse them from the stain on their reputation and the shame with which they will have to live for the rest of their lives. This out of wine situation leads this couple to a sense of insecurity, fear, and finally the possibility of shame. And our own situation, and particularly this COVID pandemic, has led us to senses of the we're out of circumstances. Again, at first, and right, that kind of silly thing, we were out of toilet paper. And more seriously, there was that concern that we were out of masks and hand sanitizer. And even now, we're out of rapid testing kits, or at least they're hard to be found. But much more significantly, we seem to be out of energy and perseverance, and fatigue sets in. We're out of patience with so many other people, and impatience sets in. We're out of a sense of calm and compassion, and instead we are filled with frustration, and maybe even anger. And we're out of understanding, and we seem to be in confusion. And at best, we seem to be left with a grim resignation. And certainly most of us now are not living lives that we would consider to be ones of contentment, blessing, joy, and celebration. And apart from the whole COVID pandemic situation, in our own personal situations, what are you out of? Materially, and for most of us this is not the case, but indeed for some of our other brothers and sisters, we could be out of food, out of shelter, out of clothing. Physically, there are some of us, and we know of others, who are out of health. And mentally, we know that folks are out of fortitude and determination and tough-mindedness. And instead, there is stress, anxiety, and fear, and this sense of foreboding, that inner conviction of a coming misfortune. And we're out of the camaraderie and support that we felt in social relationships. And instead, many of us are confronted with notions of isolation and loneliness, which means existentially, and I think this holds true for all of us, we are out of trust. And there seems to be this sense of uncertainty as we ask ourselves these questions: will there be enough? And is this doing enough? And in our world, there are various products and the media and politicians who attempt to address this we're out of feeling in which we find ourselves. Advertisers in selling products saying, well, we can handle all of the situations that you feel. All you need is a new car, or some new clothes, or maybe some more beer or alcohol, or maybe really all you need are whiter teeth, fresher breath, wrinkle and blemish-free skin, which you can either clean up by purchasing these cleansers or cover up by purchasing these cosmetics. But do any of these products ever address that existential we're out of feeling that we have? The media promises to fill and fulfill our emptiness and isolation and loneliness. Look, you've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. There's all those streaming services, Netflix, Disney Plus, Crave, Amazon, Hulu. You can binge and never feel alone. Or look at those influencers on social media that will get you over whatever predicament in which you find yourselves. And certainly, the politicians promise to address this. They say, yes, we have health care in hand, and we're addressing the pandemic and long-term care and mental health and the drug crisis. We're making sure that the economy will be stable. We're trying to build a just society with reconciliation and giving dignity and respect to all different diversities. We're promoting and enhancing public safety and want to bring about affordable housing, especially for those who find themselves homeless. But the promises that products offer, or media, or politicians, all seem to fall short, and we're still left empty. We still feel out of it, still left with these feelings of isolation, emptiness, uncertainty. So what will address our maladies? Knowing, understanding, seeing a gracious God at work. And that's what the season of Epiphany is all about. Epiphany, that Greek word, literally means to shine forth, to shine upon, to reveal, to disclose. And all the gospel readings in this Epiphany season shine forth, reveal, enable us to come and see Jesus, and thus come and see God for who they really are. So come to this wedding celebration at Cana and see who Jesus really is, who God really is. We already know the situation. We're out of wine and the dire consequences that can follow from this for the newlywed couple and their families. Into this situation of failure, loss, fear, and potential shame, Jesus quietly makes his presence known. How so? The gospel writer describes it with only 4 words. Literally, these words. The water wine became. That's it. The water wine became. That's the sign. That's what points to, witnesses to, shines forth, reveals, discloses who Jesus is and who God is. What's the sign? The sign is God is gracious. but it's an angle on grace that we don't always consider and easily forget. Usually, when we think about grace, and indeed when I talk about grace, it's understood in terms of things like unconditional acceptance, unlimited compassion, a free gift, forgiveness. But the understanding of grace we have from this story at the wedding of Cana, the sign, the water wine became, wants us to understand grace as abundance. The very first time God uttered the words in Genesis chapter 1, "Let there be," all creation was graced. All life was graced. Your life, my life, was graced with abundance. And failure on our part, or bad planning, human short-sightedness, self-centeredness, satiated shamelessness will not overcome this abundant grace. The wedding at Cana, the water wine became sign, is the first concrete disclosure of what John told us in the prologue. Out of his fullness, we have all received grace upon grace. Grace as abundance. Farmers know this sense of grace. How many kernels of wheat does one get from one kernel? How many ears of corn from one kernel of corn? Gardeners know this. How many tomatoes or zucchini do you get from one seed? Or how one apple seed will become a tree which will produce much fruit for many years to come, and indeed for generations. Creation is abundance, and that's grace. Creation is grace at work, just like redemption is grace at work. Wherever you look in this whole wide world, it is God's grace at work. Wherever you look in your life, it is God's grace at work. What is our response? Knowing that God's grace is always at work in this world, in the lives of people, that it's at work in us. That response has been named faith, or I think more accurately, trust. Now, there's kind of this unusual, weird incident in the wedding at Cana story, where Jesus' mother gives a directive to the servants. She says, "Whatever he tells you to do, do it." Now, why should the servants listen to her? She has no power over them. She can't enforce what she says. Indeed, they're not even her servants. But I think we are to understand what she's saying. Whatever he tells you to do, do it. She's basically saying to them, when Jesus comes around, whatever he says, as crazy as you may think it might be, trust him. And indeed, Jesus comes around and very oddly says, fill these purification jars with water. Draw some out of it. Take it to the steward. They're out of wine. Why would you take water to the steward? But whatever, trust him. And the water wine became. God's work of grace led to abundance for all. And so for you, whatever your whatevers, you're out of milk, you're out of toilet paper, there's a lack or loss in physical or mental health or in your relationships, whatever the uncertainties that you face, trust the creative, redemptive, surprising, transformative grace at work in your life and in the world. Trust is carrying out a task, knowing grace is at work. In the story of the wedding of Cana, that grace at work led to the abundance of what in our ways of measuring would be over 1,000 bottles of wine, more than you could drink at any wedding celebration. In fact, our wedding hosts could write Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. My cup overflows. Goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And we could write that too. Grace as abundance means our cups overflow, and goodness and mercy will follow us all the days of our lives. Out of Christ's fullness, we have all received grace upon grace. Grace is not only amazing, it is also abounding. To paraphrase that hymn, Amazing Grace, through many dangers, toils, and snares I have already come. Abounding grace has brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me through to life abundant. Amen.